Hello and welcome to another car fix video from Car Fix, where I do what I love and I love what I do. In today's video, we're going to be replacing the starter on a 2007 BMW 525 Xi X-Drive, which means it's all-wheel drive. The starter location is actually under the intake manifold. I don't know if you can see it, but it's right there. The way to test the starter is by checking the power signal coming from the computer to the starter solenoid, which is basically activates the starter motor. Now to do that, you're gonna have to remove the air cleaner and the air filter, disconnect the mass airflow sensor, and remove this whole box and unplug the solenoid wire. Now the air cleaner is only 2 bolts, which is right here. I think this is T30, I think, if I'm not mistaken, or 25. Just remove the box out of the way, the air filter out of the way, and this comes out. Of course, I already disconnected the mass airflow sensor and the air snorkel. To test the power coming from the computer to the starter solenoid on crank, there's a junction over here that has a connector in it, which is this one. This one goes to the solenoid, starter solenoid right there, and the male part is actually in there, so you have to dig in there and hook up your test lead to it and check for power on crank. If you have power on crank and the car is not cranking, that means the starter solenoid is bad, or the starter motor is bad. I've already checked this, and I have power coming from the computer in the crank position, and also this right here feeds to the starter solenoid. I do have ground here, but when I fuse power to this wire right here, nothing happens. So that means the solenoid is bad, and the starter has to be replaced. Of course, when replacing an alternator or a starter, the first thing you need to do is basically disconnect the battery. And I always like to put a cover on top of the post right there, just in case. The only way to remove the starter on this engine is basically to remove the intake manifold. It's not necessarily to remove the intake completely out of the way, but it would be nice to get the whole thing out. But I've done it sometimes when I just move it to the side and just pull the starter out. But if I don't have enough room, I'll just remove the whole intake out. Also, this cover has to be removed. This cross member right here has to be removed. Those cabin filters right there have to be removed. So yeah, and you have a power cable that actually runs from here, that goes to this one right here. That one comes from the battery, or this one comes from the battery, I'm sorry, and this one feeds back to the car. So yeah, that's a lot of fun. First, we have to remove this decorative cover right here, and also this cover right here just snaps in with 2 locking tabs right there. Just pull it out. Next thing, I'm going to remove the air cabin filters right there. Now the cabin filters will be beside this locking bar right here. It has a locking tab right here, which is basically got to just turn it like that and come out. Of course, you're going to have to unplug all this stuff right here. This cabin filter is really filthy. Now I need to remove this whole cowl cover right here where the cabin air filters sit. Also these gutters right here, they have to be removed. I mean, you gotta make sure you put them in the correct position, otherwise water will leak inside the cabin right there. So it's just gotta move this like that, and same thing on the other side. See, water goes through those gutters right here and goes in here. There's a flap in there, and water drains down to the outside instead of going into the cabin right there. Because this right here feeds to the ventilation, heat and air conditioning and ventilation system right here. So if you have water here, it will go inside the cabin. To remove this tension strut right here, or cross member right there, I have to remove the cabin filters housing right here. The cabin filter housing has those locking tabs right there. 1, 2, 3, and it has a screw right here same thing on the other side, and the stop part should come out, and then I can remove the tension strut right here. All right, there's also a lock and tap under this plastic cover right here. Now to remove this, you just lift on this guy right here and just slide it forward. I mean, you know, towards you, and it should come out. And there's a tap right there, a lock and tap. Alright, this cabin filter housing is actually in two pieces. Make sure you put them in the correct position when you install them, because one goes on top of the other one. It creates a seal right there. Alright, I got the housing out. Remember that flap I told you about, you know, for the gutters on the drain? It's right here. Now, if that cover is not installed correctly, it will leak on. This is where the wiring harness. Already there's water there. You see, there's the wiring harness and fuses, and so you don't want this stuff to get wet. The tension strut has 4 bolts. You got 2 on the back here, and 1 on each side. 1 here, and 1 on the other side. And this wiring harness right here and battery cable, basically all you gotta do is just it's supposed to have a clips right here on both sides, but it's missing. So all you gotta do is just pull it out. It should come out after you remove those. If you have those clips right here, you just remove those first, and then you just pull the whole thing out. The tool for the tension bar struts bolt is T45. You know, some of those bolts are loose. That tells me, like this one was loose. It tells me that someone was already there doing some repair and he forgot to tighten those bolts down. When removing this tension strut bolts, especially the rear ones, make sure you hold them. You don't want them to fall back down in there, because you won't be able to get them back up. Alright, now I got all the bolts out, and there's a tension strut. Alright, now we got to the icky parts right here. You have the oil separator hose right here, or the oil trap. Well, this one uses an oil separator, which is actually you know, mounted under the manifold. You need to be careful when disconnecting this oil trap hose right here, because it might actually break. If it breaks, the whole oil separator has to be replaced. So I'm going to be careful with it, not to break it, because they do break because it's plastic. And the way to disconnect this, you have to, you know, push on both sides like this and just get it out of there. So after I got the oil separator hose disconnected, it looks like the tab was broken. So the locking tab was broken. Not the hose, the locking tab only has one side is still attached, the other one is broken. So I don't know if this is gonna stay in place or not. I have no idea. We'll see what happens. Now I'm gonna remove the air snorkel right here, and disconnect some of the sensors right here, like this one right here. The oil pressure switch. Now the repair procedure is required to remove this oil filter housing, but I'm not gonna do that because I'm just gonna create you know, a lot of problems with removing this guy. So I'm just gonna try to just move the manifold out of the way so I can get the starter. Also, the fuel line has to be disconnected. It's got a bracket right here with a bolt, so I'm just gonna move it out of the way. The clamp for the air snorkel right there is 6mm socket, and you notice it's facing down, so it's gonna be a lot of fun trying to break that one loose. Remove that clamp right there. Use a 1/4-inch ratchet and a 6mm socket, and you just go like this, and it should come out. Also, before you remove the snorkel, you need to remove the vacuum booster or brake vacuum booster line right here, and pull the whole thing out. Now, anytime you have the throttle body actuator or throttle plate exposed like this, I would always like to cover it, because you don't want anything to fall in there. I'll end up in the engine. So those connectors right here, I'm gonna have to remove them. Also, I'm gonna unplug the alternator. So basically everything in my way, I have to unplug it. Maybe I have to remove this bracket too. The oxygen sensor wires, they run through the manifold right there. And also I might have to remove the throttle body actuator. Alright, now I'm removing the throttle body actuator, 4 bolts right there. You always start with the bottom bolts, remove the bottom bolts first, then remove the top one. This way you can, there we go. Now I'm going to put this cover on the manifold. Just get this one out of the way. And put this here. There we go. Alright, now I need to move this wire harness junction. Has connectors inside of it. This one right here is for the starter solenoid. That's where you check the the power on crank. And where is it? You gotta be careful with BMW. Some connectors are actually interchangeable. This is the connector, the one I checked for the starter. It plugs in here. And it has a tap on it. This is the locking tab right there. All you gotta do is just push it to unlock it and release it to lock it. So this box has to be removed. It's got a slot right here with a bracket. This is a metal bracket back there that holds it in place. I gotta remove this out of the way, and I might have to remove the bracket. Basically, I'm gonna have to remove everything on this side just to make sure that just to have enough room to move the manifold this way so I can get the starter out. This bracket I have to remove too. The purge solenoid vapor hose right here disconnected. The purge solenoid is actually under this. The purge solenoid is actually under this junction right here, and it's right here. This is the vacuum hose coming from the manifold, and the purge is underneath here. This is the plug for the purge, and you have the oil trap heaters right there, connectors underneath. Now I got everything out of the way almost. I have to remove this map sensor right there, the bracket, the purge solenoid hose, vacuum hose right here. This was hard to unplug because you don't have enough room, and you have to squeeze these two blocks together and push it out, pull it out to disconnect it. I got the fuel line disconnected. Now I gotta remove this brace and loosen the intake manifold. No, the intake manifold is not going to come out with those studs in there, so I'm going to have to remove the nut and remove the studs. But before I do that, I need to mark the position of all the studs. So you got 1, 2, 3. You got 3 studs. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark the position of those. So you got one here, and you have one here. For this brace right here, see the bolts through. Those are the bolts for the fuel rail. You got one here and one there. Those bolts right here are 11 millimeter socket. They're not 12 or not 10. They're 11 millimeter. The manifold is loose now. All I gotta do is just remove those studs right there. 1, 2, 3. And I have what is this? This is E6 right there. I don't know if you can see it. It's a star head. I'm gonna remove those studs and move the manifold to the left side so I can gain access to the starter. Alright, I got the manifold out of the way, and there's the starter right there. I need to cover those intake ports right there, so I don't want anything to fall in there because the valves are right there, so you gotta be careful. Also, this vacuum hose that comes from the mechanical vacuum pump going to the vacuum booster. It's got clamps on it. I'm not gonna mess with it. I'm just gonna leave it the way it is. Like I said before, the repair procedures require removal of this oil filter housing, but I'm not gonna remove it. And I'm just gonna get the starter and just enough space to remove the starter and install the starter. One more thing about this starter job replacement, the mounting bolts for the starter are aluminum, and they have to be replaced when you remove them. Also, I'm going to have to remove this lock sensor out of my way too. To disconnect this connector right here, it's got a locking tab. You push on it and you just pull out, and this nut right here for the battery cable is 13 millimeter socket. Now the fun part. The starter bolts, you got you know, the top one facing you know, backwards, and the lower one is facing forward. The socket is let me see, what is this? It's E14. That's the socket for the starter bolt. This one right here, you have to get it from the front, from the back. But this one, the one with the blue mark on it, I can get it from here. The problem with this, what's under the starter is the crankshaft position sensor. As you can see, this is the connector for it right there, right here. Most of the times when people replace the starter on a BMW, it's either they damage the connector or the crankshaft position sensor, and the car will be at no start, you know, after the job. So you gotta be careful when removing the starter. And also this starter might be actually seized on the bell housing of the transmission, so you gotta be careful with that. For the rear bolts for the starter, the socket will not fit, shallow or deep well. So what I'm using an 11 millimeter 12 points. Doesn't have as much contact with the bolt as the E14, but it should do the job. The starter is seized up inside the bell housing. I already got the top bolt out. This is a long bolt. This is the top one right here, and it will not come out, you know, that easy because it's long and it hits the transmission back there. So you gotta be patient with this one because it's really not that easy to remove it. Now I need to free the starter up from the bell housing. I left the lower bolt halfway in, so this way when I pry on it, if it comes out, it doesn't drop on the crankshaft position sensor and damage it. And we'll see what happens. Finally, I got the starter to come out of the transmission bell housing right there, and I have the lower bolt with the socket on it. I'm just gonna remove it with the starter. All right, I got the starter out. This right here, I don't know if you can see it or not, but that's the crankshaft position sensor right there. It's right below the starter. Now I'm gonna clean this right here and this. All right, now I have the bell housing cleaned. I always test the starter before I install the new one. Believe it or not, this is the second starter and the second new starter, or remanufactured one, because the first one was bad. So for a big job like this, I always test the starters to make sure they're working. Because if I install a bad starter, I'm gonna have to do the job one more time, and that's no one wants that. When you're installing the bolts for the starter, make sure you snug them evenly, so the starter will not go in sideways and then will not be installed correctly. So you need to you know, snug the top one and the bottom one evenly. So this one I had to use the 11 millimeter right there. And you have to be very patient with that one because you don't have a lot of room. And make sure you start the bolt by hand before you put the wrench on it. You don't want to strip the starter bolts or the bolt itself. I mean the starter both threads inside the starter, and the damage the new aluminum bolt. The torque specs for the starter bolts has actually two different specs. The long one, which is the 85 millimeter, the long one, is 20 Newton meter plus 180 degrees, or 14.7 foot-pounds plus 180 degrees. Now the bottom one, the short one, which is the 30 millimeter right here, is 20 Newton meter, which is 14.7 foot-pound plus 90 degrees. So this one, the short one takes 90 degrees and the long one takes 180 degrees. And for this nut right here, where the battery cable goes, it's 115 inch-pound. You cannot over torque this one because you'll damage the starter. Before I install the intake manifold back on the cylinder head, I need to change the intake manifold gasket right here. I got 6 of them. They have to be replaced. Every time you remove the intake manifold, the gaskets have to be replaced. When you install the intake manifold new gaskets, you gotta make sure they're in and they're even on all 6 ports right there. And also you need to clean the intake ports on the cylinder head right here. Make sure no debris or oil or anything like that. Now I got the intake manifold in place. those nuts and bolts, the torque specs are 15 millimeter, which is about maybe 11 foot-pounds to 12 foot-pounds. Unfortunately, when I installed the intake manifold, this hose broke where it goes to the oil separator, so I had to replace it. This is the old one right here. That's the heater. Yeah, they always break. Now I got all the connectors connected, the oil pressure switch, the oxygen sensors right here. Also the purge solenoid, vacuum hose right here. I don't know if you can see it or not, it's right there. And the purge solenoid connector under this plate. This connector is for the throttle body actuator. This is connected. The gas line bracket on the gas line is connected. Make sure you tug on that, make sure it's connected all the way. And this bracket for the wiring harness and the battery cable, all in place, and the alternator too. Now I need to put the throttle body actuator and put the air snorkel and the cabin air filter housings, and that's it. Alright, now the only thing left to do is to see if the car is gonna crank and start. Go ahead and crank. Alright, shut it off. Alright, this job was about replacing a starter on a BMW 2007. This job is not for the average Joe, so if you don't know what you're doing, I don't recommend doing this job, because this job will make you mad and frustrated. So, and you will break stuff, and you're gonna make more mess than, or you're gonna break more stuff than the ones you started with. So, I would probably recommend leaving this job for a professional, because it's really a hard job. It's not that easy job. If you don't know what you're doing, you're gonna mess things up.